Hello, dear friends and students, wherever you may be. We're going to do this week's shiur about Lag BaOmer, the holiday that's now upon us. Lag BaOmer, it literally means the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, 33rd days, 33 days from Passover, 17 days more to go before Shavuot. And of course, it's a wonderful, beautiful, amazing, most important day in the year. This is the day of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the harbinger of Kabbalah, the great sage, the great Tanaic sage who wrote or headed the Beit Midrash, the house of study from which came the whole book of the Zohar, but it's all ascribed to him because he was really the head of, he was the teacher, and all of them studied under him. There were really just a bunch of 10 people, a group of 10 people in the 2nd century who, aside from their normal, regular learning of Torah, writing the Mishnah, working on explaining all the different aspects of the oral Torah, they would also gather around and meet in the country or in rooms, and they would sit and they would delve and dive into the mysteries of the hidden inner dimension of the Torah, Pnimiyut Torah, which was later known as Kabbalah. And so really this is the holiday of Kabbalah. This is the day, it's even called the Matan Torah, the day of the giving of the Torah, of the Pnimiyut Torah, of the inner dimension of the Torah. 70 days from now, we're going to have Yom Matan Torah, Shavuot, the day of the giving of the Torah. But a little bit before that, we have this wonderful day that's all about, as a preparation for receiving the Torah as a whole, connecting our souls to the inner dimension, the deeper dimension of the Torah, which is the Kabbalistic or esoterical level. So all this is celebrated on this day. It's the day that Rabbi Shimon passed away, as I said. His soul ascended to heaven. But we have this principle that says that when a soul leaves this world, and in many ways it shines even more strongly than it did while it was here. And the metaphor used is of the sun setting. When the sun shines, it shines so brightly you can't look at it. It blinds you. But when it sets, then it's dark. But on the other hand, you can get the sunlight indirectly via the moon. So the idea is that when a tzaddik is alive, a righteous man, he's alive, he shines like the sun, it's bright, but if you look directly at him, you could get blinded, you could miss the light, you could not appreciate it enough. But when he sets, when he leaves this world, then he's gone and it's dark. On the other hand, through his books, through his students, through his legacy, that's like the moonlight, you can appreciate, and it helps you, it guides your way through the darkness. It's sort of, right, like the moon at night. It guards you, it gives you some light to walk using that light during this dark time. So that's the idea. That's when a holy soul goes up to heaven, it's really a positive day. It's a day of celebration. This is how it's called, Hilula. So this is why Lag BaOmer is one of the greatest, most joyous days, in which, when it's normal times, not like right now, but in normal times, people set bonfires, and of course the fire itself also is a beautiful metaphor for the inner dimension of the Torah, because it constantly moves and shifts and changes. It's something, it's intangible, you can't grasp it. It also could burn you, but it also gives you warmth and gives you light. And that's, again, it's a wonderful metaphor for the whole level of Kabbalah, the inner dimension of the Torah. So we celebrate bonfires, and if you live here or you visit here, Eretz Israel, during this time, then again, under normal circumstances, many people go. I think it's one of maybe the biggest Jewish gathering year-round. People go to Meiron, where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried. That's where his tzion is, his burial place, and they celebrate all night. It's an amazing experience, and may we merit to go back to the days that we can do this like in normal times. So So this is going to be our Lag BaOmer class. And now it's a very meaningful day in many, many ways. When you look at its place during the counting of the Omer, it has a very unique place for several reasons. So we'll start with the deeper one, then we'll go to the more obvious one, because that would lead us to our main topic for today. So the deeper one is that we know that the counting of the Omer is 49 days, right? It's 7 weeks, 7 times 7, it's 49 days, the 50th day being Chag Shavuot itself. So you take the 49 days, this number 49, you can find a few words or terms in Hebrew that have this numerical value. But one of the most prominent ones would be Lev Tov, a good heart, a kind heart. Lev Tov equals 49. So the whole purpose of the counting of the Omer is to have a good heart, to have good ethical conscience, and to have a good attributes, to be good people. So 49 days means we want to go through these days day by day, counting the Omer, learning, rectifying our emotional attributes until we have a good heart at the end of this, and then this heart becomes the vessel for accepting the Torah. Just before the people of Israel accepted the Torah, when they came to Mount Sinai, it said that they came there and they stood there Ke'ish echad belev echad, as one people, as one person, all of them united with a one heart. So this heart must have been a very good heart if they could be in such a state of unity. Lev Tov is 49. Now if you take these two, but it's two words, right? It's Lev and then Tov. So how much is the numerical value of each word? So Lev is 32 and Tov is 17. So this connects to Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the Omer. So that's the first day of the good days, right? We finished 32 days. We finished Lev, heart days. Now we have a heart. That's very good. It's a good start. We have a heart. That's Lev, 32 days. And on Lag BaOmer, we begin the 17 more important days of not just having a heart, but making sure it's a good heart. So this goodness starts with Lag BaOmer. We want to take our hearts. First, we need to have a heart. We need to have an emotional balance, and we need to have open hearts. And then as they're opened, then Rabbi Shimon can come in with his goodness, with his benevolence, with his light of the inner dimension of the Torah, and fill our hearts until they become good hearts. So it's Lev days, and now we begin the Tov days. So that's the deeper reason. Another reason why this day is a very happy day, and was a happy day before it was the Yortzeit, the day of the passing of Rabbi Shimon, was because it was in this day that the epidemic, a very contemporary topic, the epidemic that killed all of Rabbi Akiva's students ceased. So Rabbi Akiva, of course, one of the greatest sages, if not the greatest sages of all the Jewish sages, he was the teacher of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He had 5 important students that carried on his Torah for the next generations, and one of them was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So Rabbi Akiva was his teacher, but he didn't just have those 5 students. He had 24,000 students. Unfortunately, there was this terrible epidemic, and during the period of time, the counting of the Omer, just after Passover, they started tragically dying one by one because of this epidemic that spread across that area, and they all died. But then the epidemic stopped on the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer, before it was the day of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. There's something happened in that day that the epidemic suddenly stopped. People stopped dying. So the fact that we had this epidemic, that these 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died during these weeks, that's the main reason that we Jews have this mourning customs during this time, right? That we don't listen to live music or really any music, any instrumental music, and we don't cut our hair or we don't shave. And because all these are signs of mourning in memory of those 24,000 students. So all this, or most of this, stops on Lag BaOmer. We go back to hearing music, we play music, and we go back to, again, cutting our hair. It's, of course, very traditional to have the first haircut made on this day when you're with 3-year-old boys. they have their haircut. The Opsherenish or the Chalake, it takes place on this day. So this was a very joyous day, even before Rabbi Shimon, before it turned out to be his passing day. Now, why did those 24,000 students die? That's another very interesting topic. They all died because it says they were disrespectful to one another. They didn't treat one another with enough respect. And this is very odd and very troubling in a way, because we know that Rabbi Akiva was a great tzaddik. Not only that, we know that he put a lot of stress on brotherly love, on love. And he said that the most important verse in the entire Torah that sort of encapsulates all of the Torah within it is Ve'ahavta lere'acha kamocha. You should love your friend as you love yourself. Ve'ahavta lere'acha kamocha. Ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is the greatest general rule within the Torah. General rule means klal, that it's kolel, it includes within it everything else. Everything else, so to speak, stems from this rule. So he put a stress on love very, very much. And obviously he taught this to his students. So it's a big question. How come the students of Rabbi Akiva, who were raised, who were taught to follow this precept of brotherly love, of love for one's friend, above everything else, how could they sin so severely in disrespecting one another to the point that they had to be punished in this terrible epidemic that they all died in? So that's a big question that's going to follow us, and we will try to answer it during this shiur. Now, very interestingly, the fact that the day it stopped turned out years later to be the day of the passing of Rabbi Shimon. That is his day, right? Lag BaOmer is Rabbi Shimon's day. And the fact that he died on this day, even if it happened only after, many years after that plague ended, tells us something, that if that day is destined to be his day, then in a way it was his day even before that. And in a way we can say that somehow, in some way, that we have to figure out, it was the power of Rabbi Shimon, or his essence, his soul essence, his being, something about him, about his soul, about his story, about what he's about, had the power to stop this epidemic, in a way, right? It's sort of retroactively. But again, it's not just retroactive, because if that day is destined to be his day, it was his day even before that. So the fact that the epidemic stopped on the day that in the future would be his yortzeit means that something about him has to do with stopping the epidemic. And just on the most simple level, the way we observe the Jewish calendar is that we have the mourning aspects up until Lag BaOmer, and then Lag BaOmer we say enough. Now we can cut our hair, and now we can play music, and you do play a lot of music on Lag BaOmer. It's a big, big, wonderful celebration. So the fact is that regardless of what happened before what, we have the mourning, and then Rabbi Shimon puts a stop to the mourning and says, we've mourned enough, now let's be happy, let's be joyous, and let's sing and let's dance and around the bonfire, all as brethren, all of us together with this wonderful brotherly love. So what does this mean, right? What did Rabbi Shimon have? And he was a student of Rabbi Akiva. So usually we have a rabbi and a student, a teacher and a student. So the teacher is above the student. The teacher is higher than the student. But here we see that Rabbi Akiva, the teacher, was not able to implement into his students, or to give them enough to inculcate within them this the property of love, or so it appears, that they sinned in being disrespectful for one another. But then his student, one of those students, who didn't die in the plague, obviously, he was able to do something that his teacher was not able to do. He was able to do the next step somehow in the Torah of Rabbi Akiva, because that's the other thing. There's an element in which the teacher is higher than the student. There's another element in which the student can take what his teacher taught him and take it one step further. So this is what Rabbi Shimon did, apparently. He took the teachings of Rabbi Akiva one step further, and he was able to rectify in some way the tragedy of the students of Rabbi Akiva. So all this, we need to understand what it means. In order to do so, we are now going to go back to Rabbi Akiva, to his generation, and we're going to look at the story that tells of how Rabbi Akiva learned the deeper inner dimension of the Torah, the esoteric level, the Kabbalah. How did he learn Kabbalah? Because if Rabbi Shimon is the master of Kabbalah, the writer of the Zohar, the greatest teacher of Kabbalah we've ever had, thanks to him, to Rabbi Shimon, we have the book of Zohar and all the Kabbalistic explanations that came after that. He must have learned it from Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva himself was initiated into the secrets of Kabbalah. So we're going to look at this story of how Rabbi Akiva was initiated, and we're going to see what it tells us about what he was able to learn and what he maybe didn't learn enough, or he didn't rectify enough, which ended up causing in some way the epidemic, and that would help us explain how Rabbi Shimon rectified his own teacher or advanced the teachings of his teacher. So the story is the very famous story of the 4 people who entered the Pardes. This appears in the Talmud, in the tractate of Chagiga. And what is Pardes? Pardes literally means orchard. It's actually not a Hebrew word, it's a Persian word, but it does appear in the Hebrew Bible, in the Tanakh. It appears 3 times, once in the prophet Nehemiah, and then the other time is in the Song of Songs, and then the 3rd time is in Kohelet, when Ecclesiastes, when King Solomon describes the many gardens and orchards that he had. So this word Pardes, it's not a Hebrew word, but it's when the Jewish tradition, the Tanakh, and then later on the sages adopt a non-Hebrew word, they do so very, very deliberately, and they take a word that can be elevated and can mean something, it can be interpreted as meaning something it's very meaningful, it's very deep. And the same applies to this word Pardes. So it means orchard, comes from Persian, and it's actually the root, or the original root of the English word paradise. So when we're talking about the story of the 4 sages who entered the Pardes, we can also describe this as the 4 sages who entered paradise. Now this word Pardes, again, many people know this, but I'm going to display this briefly. The word Pardes is an acronym, and it stands for 4 Hebrew words, which reflect the 4 levels of meaning within the Torah. Right? This is very crucial to understanding this whole story. What does it stand for? What is this story about the 4 sages? So before we read the story, we're going to read the story. Before we do so, we're going to look at just the meaning of the words. So, right, Pardes, acronym, right? So the important letters are P, R, D, and S. That's the consonants. The vowel letters don't exist in Hebrew, so they're not part of the word. And again, these 4 letters stand for 4 different Hebrew words, which represent the 4 levels, hermeneutical levels, that is, levels of interpretation, levels of meaning within each and every Torah text or bit or idea. So the first level, and we're going to go from the bottom up because each level is higher, it's deeper, but that means it's also higher than the one before that. So the first level is called the Pshat. Pshat is the literal meaning, it's the simple meaning. Pashut is simple, literal meaning. Sometimes that literal meaning isn't so obvious, sometimes people argue about what the literal meaning is, but we assume and it's obvious that whatever the Torah says must have, at the very least, a literal, simple, straightforward meaning. So that's the Pshat, that's the outside layer that everyone can see. Then as we go deeper into this orchard, we can imagine ourselves going deeper and deeper into an actual orchard, discovering more and more beautiful, fruit trees in this. And so the next level is called Remez. Remez means hint or allusion. The Torah hints at further meanings, things that are deeper, that they're not explicitly said, but they're hidden there. And so it alludes to many more things. It has allegorical meanings. It has all kinds of ideas that are only hinted at briefly. So finding those, exploring those, that's the Remez level of the Pardes. Third is the Drash. Drash is the root of Midrash. Midrash, the Chazal Midrashim are the wide literature written by the sages that explores and goes very, very deeply into exploring what is implied or hidden within the text, not just the illusions, the hints, but whole stories, whole ideas that spring. That's really a big orchard that springs out of. It's much bigger than the Torah itself, and tries to inquire into the deeper meanings and stories and ideas and philosophical notions and ethical ideas that spring forth from the previous two levels. And then finally we have the third level, which is called the Sod. Sod means secret, or it also means mysticism, right? So this is the esoteric, mystical level of the Torah. And the idea is that this is really the deepest and most significant level. This is really an infinite level. We can even see the shape of the Samech, the final letter of the Pardes. It's a circular shape. It hints at something infinite. If you want to find a finite image or symbol, so that would somehow be symbolic of infinity, this is a good symbol, right? It's because it's something so balanced and equal about it, and you can go endlessly about it, right? When we have this other, of course, lying 8 kind of symbol for eternity, but part of the idea of this 8 is that it's a loop, right? Just like this is a simpler loop. So these are the 4 levels of the Pardes. Now the idea is that when we're talking about the story of the 4 sages who entered the Pardes, it's always explained that really what they came into is the highest level, right? It's the level of the Sod. When they went into the Pardes, they didn't just go into the Pshat and the Remez and the Drash. That's not a big deal. What really happened was that they went all the way into the Pardes. So they went into the Sod level. That's the idea. So ever since then, the word Pardes, although it alludes to all 4 levels, in particular, it refers to the mystical, Kabbalistic level of the Torah that you can get lost in. And that's really what happened to them, right? They 3 out of the 4 don't make it out normally. They don't make it out in one piece or in peace. So so going into the orchard means they delved into the secrets of the Torah, into the mystical level of the Torah. So this is background for the story. And now we're going to go into the story itself. We're going to see what happened to the 4 sages as they started exploring together the mystical aspect level of the Torah. 4 entered the Pardes. The sages taught. 4 entered the orchard, the Pardes. And they are Ben Azai and Ben Zoma. Right? These are all well-known sages from the same generation. Acher. Acher literally means other. And this is really Elisha ben Avuya. That's his name, Elisha ben Avuya. And he was a very important sage, very great sage. And we have things in his name that are said in the Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, many places across the Talmud and the Mishnah. But at some point he became a heretic. This is in fact the background for this story. And ever since then, he wasn't called Elisha ben Avuya, even though at the beginning of this story, he wasn't a heretic yet. He was still Elisha ben Avuya, the great sage. But ever since then, he called himself this way. At some point, he said, I'm no longer Elisha ben Avuya, I am someone else. Acher, the other. I am not myself anymore. I'm not the man I used to be. And so that's how he's called, Acher. Acher also comes from the term back. He turned his back on God and on the Torah. And he turned his face, we can say, towards the other side, the Sitra Acha, the side of negativity, the side of heresy. So here's the 3rd person. And the 4th is, of course, Rabbi Akiva. And then Rabbi Akiva said to them, we're going to go over this briefly because that's not the main point, but it's part of the story. Rabbi Akiva said to them, when you reach the place of pure marble stones, Avnei Shaish Tahor, do not say water, water, because it is stated in a verse in Psalms, he who speaks falsehood shall not be established before my eyes. So it's coming to this weird place of pure marble stones, it would be a mistake to say water, water. It looks like water. It must look like water. One of the explanations is this is like a primitive or ancient mirror. It's so smooth and so pure, then it reflects the skies, and it looks just like a water, like a big pool or a lake, but it isn't. So one explanation is that he's telling them, don't be afraid to go deeper, and you don't think you'll drown. You won't drown, not necessarily. Well, they do drown in other ways. So it's very interesting, this interpretation. So one interpretation is that he's telling them, don't be afraid, you won't drown. You can go in there. Don't be afraid. You can go further. Be careful, but you can go. And the other is that don't mistake the metaphor for what it stands for. That's a very general rule in Kabbalah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai himself stressed this in the Zohar. It's usually stressed in the introduction to every Kabbalistic work. We're going to talk about God having faces, having an anatomy, having all these aspects to him. Don't mistake the metaphor for what it stands for. It's only a metaphor. God is one, and he doesn't have a face, and he cannot be described. But we're going to give some metaphors for aspects, so to speak, of divinity or godliness. So it's a mirror. Don't think it's the skies. It's not the sky. It's just a mirror. It's just a metaphor. It's just an idea. And then another interpretation is that he's talking about the meeting place of the lower waters, which is mundane or human wisdom, and the higher waters, which is divine wisdom. Kabbalah is the point of tendency, the meeting point, like the horizon, where the ocean meets the sky. And don't say water, water. Don't separate the waters. Don't say this is one thing and earthly wisdom is something else. Before the waters were separated on the second day of creation, they were one on the first day of creation. So don't say water, water as two separate things. Make sure you remember that the divine wisdom goes down here and everything reflects and connects to one another. And don't divide, right? Don't put God up there and us down here, because that's a negative divide when you're learning Kabbalah, and how it has to be connected. So these are three interpretations for these mysterious words. But anyway, they're not the main topic for today. So now what happened to all those four? Ben Azai glimpsed. So what did he glimpse? So we would think he glimpsed the secrets of the Torah. He went into the orchard and he started learning the secrets of the Torah. He got a glimpse of it. Or another interpretation, Rashi says, he glimpsed the Shekhinah, the divine presence. Because what is Kabbalah? What is learning about the secrets of Kabbalah? Is really discovering God's presence in everything. It's arriving at a state of connection and understanding that's much deeper than anything else, in which we're more separate from Hashem, or so it appears to be. So he got a glimpse of the divine presence, or he got a glimpse of the secrets of the Torah, which is really the one and the same thing, and he died. It was overwhelming. Those lights shattered him. He couldn't take it, and he actually died. And with regard to him, the verse states, precious in the eyes of the Lord, Yakar be'enei Hashem, is the death of his pious ones. Hamavta lechasidav. Now, the proper way to understand this, precious doesn't mean positive. The way doesn't necessarily mean positive. The way Rashi explains this is that precious means heavy or with great weight. And the idea is that he was a big question to God. Why did he die? Because he was young. He shouldn't have died. So it doesn't mean precious in the sense of positive. It means precious in the sense of something significant, something meaningful that he doesn't take lightly. So it's the very opposite actually of it's not a good thing. Yakar b'nei Hamavta chasidav, it's very precious to God when one of his pious ones dies, in the sense that it's a great loss, right? So Ben Azai got a glimpse of the inner level of the Torah, the Kabbalah. And of course, there's a big warning for everyone who wants to study the inner dimension of the Torah, that if you don't study it properly, it could damage you in some way. So he glimpsed and died. Ben Zoma glimpsed and was harmed. Nifga, hetzitz v'nifga. But Rashi says, all the interpreters agree, it means he went crazy. He went out of his mind. He lost it. With regard to him, the verse states, have you found honey, matzat advash? Eat as much as is sufficient for you, echol dayeka, lest you become full from it and vomit it. Pen tisba v'takienu. So honey is sweet and wonderful, but you have to be very, very careful not to overeat it, as we all know from the famous Winnie the Pooh story, that he couldn't come out of the rabbit hole because he ate so much honey. So here we can say that as a metaphor for the realms of the inner level of the Torah, going too much into it and getting lost there and overeating, you could not come back into the world, into the sane world, the mundane earthly realm of normal human life. That's what happened to Ben Zama. He went crazy. Acher, I don't know what this little dot is, a mistake. Acher chopped down the shoots. Kitzetz banetiot. He chopped down the saplings of the trees, which is again a metaphor for became a heretic. He cut down the roots of his faith. He cut himself off from godliness, from the Torah, from being Torah observant, and he became a heretic, a very well-known heretic. And it's a very sad story. It's a long story. Just after this story ends, we have the Talmud goes into each one of them and tells at greater length what happened to them, including Acher, exactly what happened to them inside, what happened, what he heard, what he thought he heard, the way he interpreted everything, and he reached the conclusion that he's losing faith in God, or he believes in maybe two gods, and he became a heretic. And only Rabbi Akiva came out safely, or in peace. Yatsa b'shalom. So this is the story, and now this is the way people remember it. But there is another detail that we have to look into. Right, I just told you that if we finish the story and you go forward, then the story sort of zooms into each and every one of those sages, what happened to him. So if you go a little further in the Talmud and you get to the zooming into Rabbi Akiva, you have another very, very important addition to his story. Although he came out safely, he has a good ending, right? It's 3 bad endings and 1 good and happy ending. But there's a small caveat to this happy ending. And this goes like this. Rabbi Akiva ascended in safety and descended safely. Right? Nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom, or Allah b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom, different versions. And this is a very important statement, because it says that not only did he come out in peace, as we said before, but the reason he came out in peace was that to begin with, as he came in peace, he came in safely, that is, he came in resolute to come back out again. That was a very important detail in the story, because he made up his mind at the very beginning, I'm not going to go crazy, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to disbelieve in God in any way. Whatever I discover, I'm going to make it out safely, and I'm going to go back to this world. And just having this in mind kept him sane and alive and a believer. And with regard to him, the verse states, draw me, we will run after you, mashcheni acharecha v'narutza. And the continuation of the verse, that's the important part, the king has brought me into his chambers. Hevi'ani melech chadarav. The king brought me into his chambers. That's what happened to Rabbi Akiva. He was introduced to the inner chambers of God, so to speak. And then now we have this addition, the caveat. And even Rabbi Akiva, the ministering angels, malachei hasharet, the good angels that are in the orchard, they sought to push, that is to push him out of the orchard. He almost didn't make it also. He was almost pushed by the ministering angels. They thought he shouldn't be there either. He shouldn't even come in. Or as he was coming in, they wanted to push him out. Maybe something else would have happened to him. But then the Holy One, blessed be He, God, intervened and said to them, leave this elder. He is fit to serve my glory. He is fit, ra'ui, leshamesh bichvodi. So the word that's translated is the Steinsaltz translation. It says glory, but I added the word honor because that's the original meaning. לשמש בכבודי. He is worthy to serve in my serve my glory, or to serve in my honor. And so you can let him be. So, right, of course, the word is very important, because the thing we know about honor also means respect, right? Kavod. And we know that the sin of the students of Rabbi Akiva later on is going to be the fact that they were disrespectful to one another. So this is a key word. But before we go into this word, we want to ask something else. We want to ask, why did the angels want to push Rabbi Akiva outside? What was their problem? So one explanation we can give, a very simple explanation, would be that they said, no one is worthy of visiting the divine orchard, regardless of who they are and what they're doing. And we're just going to push them out. And one went crazy, one died, one became a heretic, and we don't know what would have happened to Rabbi Akiva, but that one explanation is that the angel said, no one comes in. But the Ari is Rabbi Isaac Luria, the second greatest Kabbalist, much later, 14,000 years, 1400 years after Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in 16th century, of course, buried in Tzfat. He has another explanation, and he says the following, and this is a key idea. He says the reason that Rabbi Akiva, they wanted, again, God intervened, but the reason they wanted him pushed out is because of this. The orchard, the Pardes, had 4 gates, 4 different gates. And each sage came in through another gate. And the problem was, with Rabbi Akiva, that he came in through the best gate. We'll see in a minute what those gates are. Let me put it on. But the thing is, he should have gotten in through all 4 gates. That's what the sages say. Let's look at the gates. So there are gates, right? We have the 4 sages, Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva. And what they happened to them, Ben Azai died, Ben Zoma went crazy, Acher became a heretic, Rabbi Akiva came out in peace. So the idea is this, that the 4 gates of the orchard are the following. The first gate is Chokhmah. Chokhmah means wisdom. Ben Azai came through the gate of wisdom, the gate of Chokhmah. That's a good gate. But if you go through that gate in a wrong way, or if you go only through that gate, what is Chokhmah? Chokhmah is divine wisdom. And acquiring Chokhmah requires from you selflessness, complete selflessness, called bitul. Bitul is that you don't think of yourself, and you're totally selfless, and you're dedicated completely to this divine wisdom. If you go with this all the way, in a way that's unbalanced, with this bitul, or selflessness, and or nothingness, you want to reach a state of nothingness, as we know from mystical notions around the world, that if the many mystical traditions are all about becoming nothing. So because he tried to become nothing, he did it in an unbalanced way, he became nothing, he died. So Chokhmah, when taken to an extreme, unbalanced, leads you to self-nullification, right? This is bitul. Bitul is self-nullification. In a good way, you remain totally alive, but you become one with God. In a negative way, you could actually die. Your soul can come out of your body. Ben Zoma went through the second gate, the gate of Binah. Right? We have 3 sefirot, 3 intellectual faculties in Kabbalah: Chokhmah, Binah, and Dat. So Ben Zoma came in through the faculty, or the gate of Binah. Binah is understanding. It's more human. It's not a state of self-nullification. But when you have Binah without Chokhmah, when you have Binah just mundane, human, earthly rationality or intelligence, and without being self-nullified to something higher than you, then you can go crazy. And that's what happened to him. He went crazy because he had a lot of Binah with no Chokhmah, a lot of understanding without wisdom above it. When you're intelligent and you understand a lot of things, you have a lot of your intellectual faculties are in place, but you're not obligated to anything higher, and you're not connected to something higher and deeper that we can call wisdom, you can go crazy. There are a lot of famous mathematicians who went crazy because they're exploring things without any limit, without any connection, something that makes you be connected to this world. And Binah, without Chokhmah, without something to balance it, can lead to madness. Now, there are three intellectual faculties, as I said, Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at, but Da'at divides right and left into two aspects. One aspect of Da'at is called Gvura within Da'at, or might within knowledge, right? Da'at is knowledge, and knowledge balances, combines wisdom and understanding, right? Too much wisdom, you can die. Too much understanding, you can go crazy. Knowledge is balanced, it's in between, but that also again divides, and it has one side, it goes in the direction of Gvura or might, and the other side it goes in the direction of Chesed or loving kindness. Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, came in through the Gevura aspect of that. Gevura is might, has to do with limits, with separations, with distance, and he had a better chance because he didn't go crazy, he didn't die. He went through the more balanced gate of that, but because he chose to first go through the might aspect, or the judgment, it's also called, aspect of that, this judgment is a power of separating, of making distinctions. So he made distinctions between himself and God, between maybe there being two gods, maybe he did the mime, the water, he separated. He did a lot of separations, and it ended up leading him to be separated from God and from the Torah. He cut himself off. This is the cutting image of cutting the shoots, and that's what happened to him. Rabbi Akiva also came in through the balanced Dat Sefirah, but he came in through the element that you have to start with. This is really the first gate to go through. The first gate to go through is the Chesed aspect, the loving kindness aspect within that. It's part of that, which is the balanced Sefirah, but it's the part that you have to, everything you have to start with Chesed. Chesed is, again, love, loving kindness, charity, and being loving other people and being connected to other people. So Rabbi Akiva came in through this gate, and this was the best gate to come in through. That's the first gate to go through. If you go through the other gates, you see what happens. But the idea of the Arizal is the Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Kabbalist, is teaching us, is that the reason the angels wanted to push Rabbi Akiva outside is because he only came in through one gate. He should have gone in through all four gates somehow. That's what they expected of him. Again, God intervened and said, no, that's okay. He's fit. He's worthy. He can come in. He is worthy to use my kavod. But there was a debate there between God and the angels. And the angels thought that maybe if you don't go in through all the four gates, you're not worthy to serve God's kavod, God's honor or respect. So this idea really gives us the first solution to one of the riddles we started out with, which was, how come the students of Rabbi Akiva, the great man, the great sage of loving kindness, of chesed, of love, love your friend as you do yourself. This is the greatest general rule of the Torah. And also implemented here, coming in through the gate of loving kindness, how come his students didn't have enough respect for one another? And the answer is that there is a difference between love and respect. Love is when you love someone, you care about him, you feel that he's part of you, you're not alienated from him, and you care about what happens to him, and you feel that his destiny is part of your destiny, and you're connected as opposed to being disconnected. There's no separation or alienation. We're all one. This is love. The students of Rabbi Akiva, the Hasidic answer goes, this was explained at length by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, loved one another very much. They didn't. It wasn't said that they didn't love one another. It said it is said that they were disrespectful of one another, which isn't the same thing. They loved one another very much, but they disrespected each other's point of view and take on interpreting the Torah and also what their teacher Rabbi Akiva told them. Why? Because each person has his own gate. each person, each student has his own gate. He understands, he has an interpretation, an assumption about what the Torah means or what the teacher means that is different. In Hebrew, the word for gate, sha'al, is also the root of the verb lesha'el, which is to assume or to interpret. So lesha'er, one is mesha'er, one interprets according to one's sha'ar, one's gate. So we're all unique, we're all different, we all have a different gate. And they didn't respect one another's point of view, or again, their perspective or their take on the Torah. And in fact, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says beautifully, the fact that they didn't have respect testifies to their love. Why? Because if I don't love someone, I don't care what they think. If I don't love someone, he can think I think he's stupid. I don't care what he thinks. But when do I start arguing with someone? I start arguing with someone, or I start really sort of heavily disagreeing with him when I care about him. If he's nothing to me, then I don't argue with him. But the fact that they because they loved one another so much, then they couldn't stand the fact, or each one of them couldn't stand the fact that the other one didn't see things the way he saw things. Right? He loved him so much he wants to strangle him because he doesn't. Don't you see? Don't you see the way I do? No, I don't see it the way you do. And so the fact that they argued so heatedly, and the fact that they were disrespectful of one another, is a testimony to their love. They loved one another so much that they cared about the other's purported mistakes, or I cared about the fact that he's mistaken in my eyes, and you care about it so much because you love him, but you're not able to respect. Respect is appreciating a different perspective. Appreciating. It doesn't even mean agreeing, but it means not being there and sort of thinking it's completely crazy or completely ungrounded or unfounded. It means listening deeply to the other person's, where he's coming from. And if you listen to where someone else is coming from, and you're able to identify to a degree and find within yourself a level of respect for this perspective. Now the beautiful idea goes like this, that Rabbi Akiva was a sage of great love, and he came in through the great gate of loving kindness. But the criticism of the angels is something that, according to the Ari, is meaningful. The criticism of the angels says, if he's not coming in through all four gates, there's a problem here. So God says, no, it's okay. He's worthy of serving my honor, my respect, the virtue of respect, which is going through all the gates together. He's worthy. It doesn't mean he's doing it. He's worthy. Give him a chance. Maybe if he'll go into the orchard some more, he'll go out and go back through the other gates. And maybe he just needs time, or maybe the next time he's coming to the orchard, whatever. He's worthy. It doesn't mean it happened. It didn't happen. He didn't have the ability enough, right? He's a great sage. We're not criticizing, but we're trying to understand how come his students had this sin. And the idea is that he had, and he must have had a lot of respect. But the fact that the angels noticed and found it a problem, that he didn't go in through all the gates, means that to a certain level there was a time, maybe even the minutest blemish or problem in this element of respecting or going in through different gates and looking at other perspectives. Now there's a general rule in Chassidut. This was many times said by the Ishbitzer Rebbe. He said that if the parent, or in this case the teacher, has a small blemish that's neglected, that's unrectified, the next generation will have it to a much greater extent. They would have it on a larger scale. And when we know this, parents know this, that if there's something about them that's small, that's okay, but they don't fix it, they don't rectify it, it's going to come back to them big time in their child. And this is actually a good thing, because the child is really taking what the parent put on the bottom of his to-do list. For him, it's on the top of the to-do list, and so first he has to to experience it in a big way and to be there in a big way, and then he needs to rectify it. And it's really a multi-generational task. So we can say that the fact that Rabbi Akiva, the angels were critical of the fact that he didn't come in through all four gates, which is really saying he's not worthy to serve God's respect or honor, not the virtue of love, that he's great in this, but it's not just love, it's also having the wisdom and the understanding and the might aspect of knowledge and all this. That became bigger in his students. His students became, that this tiny fault became a bigger fault in them, and they loved each other very much, but they weren't able to include within them, to have this, it's called inter-inclusion, including within yourself or containing within yourself the perspective, the element of the other students. Okay, so now let's go back and remember. There was this epidemic and it killed those 24,000 students because they, so to speak, inherited this tiny blemish of disrespect or lack of proper identification with other perspectives, which became in them something more severe. And there was this epidemic, but it stopped on the 33rd day of the Omer, on Lag BaOmer, which in the future would become Rabbi Shimon's day. So we can say that it was the student Rabbi Shimon, one of those students, who rectified, who put a stop, as now as we're celebrating Lag BaOmer, we're also putting a stop to the mourning element of the counting of the Omer. He put a stop to this. He somehow rectified what his teacher was not able to rectify, and what his fellow students were not able to rectify. He rectified this element of having not just love, but respect to his fellow students. That is a full appreciation of different perspectives and integrating them into one big whole, or something that is more balanced, that's more mature, that has more multifaceted. We can say that this is what Kabbalah is all about in general. Kabbalah is all about taking different perspectives and trying to integrate them into a bigger whole. And we see this in Rabbi Shimon himself, that he had this group of 9, it was his son and 8 more students, all together were 10 people. And there's a famous correspondence made between each and every student and one of the 10 Kabbalistic Sefirot. So he himself was Keter, and his son was Chokhmah, and Rabbi Abba was Bina, and each one had a different, and the idea is that each one, we're all part of one big whole, but each one gives a different perspective. There's an idea that's sort of playing around in our generation that talks about everyone in the world having something called a confirmation bias. What is a confirmation bias? It means that everyone in the world is biased towards accepting ideas that confirm his worldview or his current worldview, and also rejecting things that challenge his worldview. We're all biased. No one is purely objective, because only God is purely objective. And that means we're biased. And the idea is that we'll gladly accept any new data that confirms our worldview. That's the confirmation bias. But we'll also be highly suspicious of any piece of data that refutes our current worldview. And the solution for this is explained beautifully by a psychologist called Jonathan Haidt. And he wrote a book called The Righteous Mind. He says we're all self-righteous, we're all righteous, we're all things we're right and the other one person's wrong, and we're built this way. And the only way to rise above this and to rectify this is something called heterodoxy. Heterodoxy is the opposite of orthodoxy. Orthodoxy means there's only one right way to think, right? You have to think in one way, there's one truth and no other way of looking at things, right? It's often said about Judaism that it's an orthodoxy, right? Because frum Jews are called Orthodox Jews, but it's of course completely wrong. It's a Greek word and it's a Christian term. We're really not orthodoxic, we're orthopraxic. We have one halacha, we have one law. We're very heterodoxic as a religion, not orthodoxic. We're orthopraxic. Well, we have one set of laws we're obligated to, and even that has some heterodoxic element to it because there are different traditions. But we are very heterodoxic. We have a lot of different ways of thinking, different perspectives. And only when you have a heterodoxic environment with people of different views would it keep you in check, keep you in balance. It would make sure you listen to other perspectives and put your mind to it, that you have to integrate it. We can say that all of the Talmud, generally, all of Jewish discourse is very heterodoxic because you have a lot of opinions and they're all arguing with each other all the time. Or you can also say that Kabbalah, more than the other levels of the Pardes, is all about this integration. Now we'll go back to the Pardes for a second, and right, we have the 4 words, the 4 levels, right? The Pshat and the Remez and the Drash and the Sod, literal meaning, literal level, hint or illusion level, the Midrash, inquiry level, and the higher esoteric level. But they divide in a way into the 3 lower ones and the upper 4th one. When you just take the 3 lower ones, the acronym becomes another word, a Hebrew word, not a Persian one, which is Pered. Pered is the root of Perud, separation, Lafri, to separate. Also, as a noun, it means mule. A mule is also separated because a mule is sterile. It can't bring any more generations. So the idea is that it's all part of the Torah, it's very holy, but if you just have the Pshat and the Remez of the Drush, you have so many different perspectives, you feel that they don't connect, they don't integrate in any way. You have this perspective and that perspective, and it's just like a lot of mosaic little stones, but it's not a mosaic, it's just the stones. And a lot of different perspectives, you can get lost. What the Sod level tries to do, I mentioned before that Sod, the letter is the symbol of a circle, and we can imagine sort of a round table, just like the Knights of the Round Table. There's a round table. Everyone's sitting around the round table. There's no head. No one is superior. There's no hierarchy. And the idea is that the level of Sod really brings an integration. The circle brings an integration to the previous levels. Because the whole idea of Kabbalah is to show that all the different perspectives, including the halachic views that were rejected, including, right, we have Hillel and Shammai, the 2 great sages. The halacha goes by Hillel, not by Shammai. But according to Kabbalah, there's truth in Shammai as well. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. They're both the words of the living God. So the Samech turns the Pered, the infertile, sterile Pered, into a fertile orchard, and it turns the Perud, the separateness of the first 3 levels, to a something whole and integrated. So again, the idea is that Rabbi Shimon, representer, harbinger of Kabbalah, rectified Rabbi Akiva and his fellow students who died in the epidemic by learning Kabbalah in a rectified way. He came into the orchard from all 4 gates. Right? Rabbi Akiva wasn't able to do this, but his students took the next step. And maybe because he saw his friends dying, so he realized he has to be very deeply respectful of different perspectives. And just this notion of trying to integrate different perspectives, this is sort of a multi-gated pathway or entry into this world of Kabbalah. So the fact that this is rectifying the element of respect. This is the deep reason. This is the answer to our question. Why was it that the epidemic that killed Rabbi Akiva's students stopped on the day that is Rabbi Shimon's future passing away day? Because the essence of Rabbi Shimon is hearing, right? Shimon means to hear. It comes from the root, it's rabbi hearing, the rabbi who hears, who listens. He was able to rectify the listening element, not just the love element that he also, just like the other students, received from Rabbi Akiva. He also had the deep kind of listening that's required to be truly deeply respectful of other points of view, other perspectives, other gates, other people's take or point of view, the way they understand things. He put it all together. That was his Kabbalistic Besorah, his gift, his chiddush, that new thing that he gave to the world, was this kind of very, very, it's all part of the Talmud anyway, but in Kabbalah it's even deeper, because Kabbalah takes all the perspectives and tries to show that they're all true in a big, multifaceted, multidimensional sort of space. Now, just looking at his name, in fact, Rabbi Shimon, right? We talked about hearing, that it means hearing. This verb, to hear, lishmoa, actually means three things in Hebrew, and can be understood in three levels, which are really three levels of hearing. This is a very important lesson to be learned if we want also to learn from Rabbi Shimon to rectify this fault of disrespect to other points of view, and we want to try and reach a state in which we're able to integrate, truly integrate points of view. Conversations end, and people go into fights, and people divorce, and people stop speaking to one another when they don't really listen to one another, when they're not really hearing each other out properly. And when you learn to listen to other people, truly listen to them, then you don't get into fights. Why? Because you're able to listen, to appreciate the point of view of the other person. Then you echo it. You say, well, you say for them, you're repeating what they're meaning. That gets them relaxed, because then they know that they're being heard, and they're not trying to still force their point of view, because this comes from the feeling of not being heard. But when you feel that you're being heard, you calm down, then you're all able to listen also. So the more we give the other person the experience of hearing them, the more we can hear ourselves. They can hear us also. And also, just the very fact of the matter is that truth is very, very complicated, and it requires a multifaceted approach. You need a lot of people. Each one, because of his sensitivity and his perspective, sees something the other people don't, and that gets knowledge evolving. It evolves by having the other person point out faults in my theory or in my idea, and then I can advance it. I can make it grow. So, truth being so complex and multifaceted, we need all these perspectives. That means we need to listen properly. So, what are the three levels of hearing or listening? So, the first one is literal hearing. This sounds obvious. That's the literal meaning, right? It's just to hear them out, but it's not obvious at all. The psychologist I talked about, Jonathan Haidt, he was very critical of the fact that in many academic departments, that you only have people from one political side of the map, and you can imagine which side of the map it is if it's the academia. But the fact is that if everyone, the same thing could happen in a conservative think tank or whatever it is. If you're in a bubble, if you're in a echo chamber, you just hear the perspective you're accustomed to, and you don't hear other perspectives, you don't grow, you don't evolve. So you have to actually hear people out. You have to listen to other perspectives. That's the first level. It sounds obvious, but it isn't. And then the second also may sound obvious, but it means understanding. When the people of Israel said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we shall do and we shall listen, or we shall do and we shall hear, it's usually interpreted as meaning we shall do and thereby we shall understand. We shall understand through doing, right? It's a different kind of understanding. So the idea is that hearing doesn't just mean physical hearing, it also means understanding, right? Shomeh ani et dvarecha, I hear what you say, means that now I understand what you mean, and I understand what you mean. So in English you say, I see what you mean, but maybe it's more of a hearing than a seeing. Then the third level, this is a Yiddish term, it's a Hasidic concept, it's an expansion of the second one. It's called derher. Derher literally means just hearing, but the context, the way it's used in Hasidut, means to a different kind of hearing. It's a spiritual hearing. It's not just understanding what you mean, but hearing the main point, the deeper level of what it's about, of what you're trying to convey. Because understanding you is one thing, and you can understand and also be alienated from this. But to hear on a deeper level is to hear the way it echoes. We spoke about an echo chamber in a negative way, that in my own views are echoed around me. But the opposite of the echo chamber is when I'm listening to someone else and he's talking to me, and then it echoes within me, and then I can echo it back. Because I didn't just hear him out. You can hear someone, not understand them. Then you can understand them, but not truly, deeply hear them, hear their soul sound, or the music of what they're saying. It's between the lines. So, Rabbi Shimon is rectifying Rabbi Akiva in this sense by perfecting the art of hearing, of taking into perspective different perspectives. He is rectifying the tiny blemish or fault of Rabbi Akiva not coming into the Pardes through the 4 gates, which then expanded in his students to be a deep respect for other perspectives or other interpretations or other ways of seeing things. Now, we're not finished yet. We're just one more important thing to do, and we're finished. If Rabbi Shimon is rectifying his teacher retroactively, and we should now, using Rabbi Shimon's perspective, go back to Rabbi Akiva and try and do what he didn't do. We're going to try and enter the orchard from all 4 gates. We want Rabbi Akiva not just to have this love that he had, right? He came in through the gate of love, the gate of chesed, of dat, within that. We want Rabbi Akiva to go through the other 3 gates, which means to include within him a little bit of the other 3 sages, although they all are faulty, negative examples, right? Because one died, one went crazy, and one became a heretic. But including them means that Rabbi Akiva has to add a little bit of everything, a little bit of each one of them, which means really Rabbi Akiva, which is us, right? Because we're identifying with Rabbi Akiva, we want to die a little. That's how we include Ben Azai within us. How can we don't want to die. But we don't want to die a lot. We want to die a little. We want to die just a little bit. Have a little bit of Ben Azai, of the Chokhmah element, even the negative kind of Chokhmah that he had, which came across as dying. We want to die a little, because then we include the Ben Azai within Rabbi Akiva. And we want to go crazy a little. Right? We're starting with love, with Rabbi Akiva's love, but we want to turn that love into respect. So we want to integrate within this love the other elements. And one of the things is we want to die loving somehow, not just a little bit, because we don't want to die. And we want to go crazy a little bit in our love. And we even want to disbelieve a little, because that's how we rectify Achel. By dying a little bit, we include Ben Azai. Going crazy a little bit, we integrate Ben Zama. By being a little bit of a heretic, we have to understand what this means. We are integrating or including within us Achel, right? So what do we mean by these 3 elements? So what does it mean to die a little? To die a little is very simply to faint. What do I mean by fainting? So there's a famous story of one of the great Chabad Rebbes. The Rebbes used to put a lot of effort into trying to cancel wicked decrees made by the government of whatever period of time. So the governments would have these terrible decrees against the Jews, and then the Rebbes, as influential figures, would try to go there and do whatever in their power to make sure this decree is nullified. So one of these Rebbes got there, and he got to the offices, and he came to the place, and he talked to the minister that was in charge of this, and he became so worked up, trying to put everything in his power to cancel this wicked decree to help his fellow Jews, that he actually fainted. Then later on, that same Rebbe sent one of his chassids, one of his students, to a similar mission to cancel have a certain decree cancelled. And the chassid went and did whatever he could, and he came back, and he failed. And he says, he came back and he says, I'm sorry, I tried, but I failed. I'm sorry, it didn't work out. And so the Rebbe asked him, but did you faint? And the explanation is, if you didn't faint, it means you didn't try all the way. I know I did it and I fainted and it worked. And if you didn't faint, you didn't go all the way. Fainting is here symbolic of doing something all the way. It means putting my heart and soul into it. If you don't put your heart and soul into something, which means, in a way, you have to faint somehow. You have to collapse. Again, you don't have to. We don't want to die, and we don't want to break ourselves completely. But we want to push the limits. We do want to push the limits, and again, we're starting with love. We want to take the love of Rabbi Akiva. That's also a story of love. It was a story of care for those fellow Jews. We want to take the love, and we want to go all the way with the love. Did you faint? If you didn't faint, it's a question how much you love in a way, or it's a question how much you extend that love to truly beyond yourself, which is the respect element within love, of going all the way for someone else that isn't you, and for having that perspective, stay alive and be well and be taken care of, and going all the way with this is a little bit dying. It's called mesirut nefesh. It's dedicating, you're putting your soul into this, and to the point of fainting, right? So this is the first element. What does it mean to go crazy a little? So to go crazy a little means just what it means, just what you think it means. It means you have to be a little crazy. Love is crazy. It says in the Song of Songs that if someone truly loves someone, people would look at them and say they're crazy. But they're not. They know they're not crazy. They know that what they're doing makes sense, but they don't care if it doesn't make sense from the outside world. It's a very messianic property. It's said in the Zohar that when the Mashiach comes, children will look at him and say, the Messiah, they will look at the Mashiach and say, he's crazy. And if the children say so, then there must be something to it, because children are precocious, and they when they see something, they know what they see, because that must mean that the Mashiach will be a little bit crazy. And so we have to also be a little bit crazy. There's a famous story by Rabbi Nachman of Breslev about the king and his assistant, and the king told him, I saw in the stars that this year everyone that's going to eat the wheat that we have, the crops that we have this year, they're all going to go crazy, and I just have enough wheat for the two of us. But then his assistant tells him, yeah, but if we eat from that wheat, then no, the assistant says, then okay, let's eat just the two of us, and we'll be sane. But then the king tells him, no, but if we're sane and everyone else is crazy, they will call us the crazy ones. They'll put us in an asylum. So we have no choice but to eat the crazy wheat. And their solution was that they're going to make a mark on each other's forehead. So when after they go crazy, they look at one another, and at least they know they're crazy, which really means the world is going crazy. There's no way to stop it, and you're going to go crazy also. But the only solution is to go consciously crazy, actively, consciously crazy. Choose to be crazy. If you're not crazy, the Mashiach won't come, because he's also a madman, and he'll understand the mad people. And crazy means you're taking infinite lights of God and you're trying to put them into this world. If the world isn't really sane, that's the truth. Some people try to pretend it's a sane world because it has whatever laws of physics, but even the laws of physics don't make sense when you go all the way down into the quantum level and into the relativistic level, and they don't make sense. There's something crazy about the world, and we have to echo this craziness by being not fully crazy, but a little crazy. And a little crazy, we need to be crazy love, mad love. If our love isn't mad, it's just sane, it's just rational, something is missing. And then the final aspect is being a little bit of a heretic, disbelieving a little bit. So how can we say this? So there's a very famous idea that really illustrates this. Rabbi Pinchas of Koritz, one of the greatest Hasidic sages, he once told his students, he was a direct student of the Baal Shem Tov, and he once told his students, everything in the world you can use to serve God with. Everything. Every attribute, every idea, every notion, every feeling, everything you can use to serve Hashem with. And then one of his students raised his arm and said, what about heresy? How can you serve Hashem with heresy? It's a contradiction in terms. You can't use heresy to serve Hashem, to serve God. And I told him, wrong, you can. How? By giving a lot of charity, giving a lot of tzedakah. Why? Because you could say yourself, well, God is guiding the world, He's in charge of everything, and He wanted this person to be poor. That could infiltrate your mind when you just have faith. And you can say, although God made him poor, and that was God's choice, now I have to be a little bit of a heretic, a little bit of putting God aside and saying, not God will take care of you, I will take care of you. This is why God put me here, so I can help you. And giving tzedakah and helping other people requires a tiny little bit of heresy sometimes. And if you listen to this and you hear this out, it's a deep thing. You can say again, it's obvious, but it's not really obvious. Because in many, many situations in life, you can say, well, that's God's will, but maybe I have to say, no, this is wrong. I have to rectify this. And it's a little bit of a heresy, but that's you need to do this, right? There's a verse that says, "La'agid baboker chasdecha ve'emunatecha balelot." In the mornings, I have to proclaim your chesed, your love, your kindness. And in the evenings, when it's night, I proclaim your faith, your emunah. So the idea is that when it's night, and you have no control over the world, it's all faith. It's all dark, and it's all faith. I don't know what's going on. I trust God. I have faith in God that everything's for the best. But when the morning comes and the light shines, and you see the world, and you get up of bed and you go into the world, you have to put faith a little bit aside, and say, now in the daytime I have to be active. Active means chesed and not emunah, and a little bit, and that means a little bit of heresy, a droplet of heresy into our world of faith, which makes us more active and take greater responsibility for the world. That's really the point here. So this is our class for today, and may we all merit to love one another deeply, but also to have a lot of respect for one another, to truly listen, actually hear out, and also understand, and also deeply, internally, spiritually hear the message that other people are trying to convey us, their sensitivities, their sensibilities, what they see that we don't, and trying to integrate them all. And may we merit very time soon, in the very soon future, the very near future, to be all together around one big bonfire in Lag BaOmer, and love one another and respect one another. And if you like this shiur, please press like on the button. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel. That would really help also. And leave your comment, anything you have to add or say, or whatever you want to say, leave your comment. And thank you very much, and I will see you next week.